When Roland Abante first walked onto the America's Got Talent stage, he carried the weight of an entire life behind his humble smile, a life shaped by hardship, loss, and sacrifices no one in the audience could ever imagine. For years, Roland worked on fishing boats in the Philippines, braving dangerous seas to earn just enough to take care of the people he loved. Singing was his escape, the one thing that kept him alive during the darkest nights. But despite the pain, despite the struggles, Roland held on to a dream that seemed impossible. Until a GT changed everything. The moment he began singing, "When a Man Loves a Woman," the room shifted. His voice, raw, emotional, overflowing with sincerity, brought the judges to tears. The world instantly fell in love with him. People didn't just see a contestant. They saw a man who had survived more than most could bear. Overnight, Roland became an international sensation, a symbol of hope for every dreamer who felt forgotten. But what fans never knew is that behind that powerful voice was a heartbreaking tragedy he carried quietly, long before the world ever heard his name. A tragedy that shaped his music, his soul, and his journey on a GT. This is the story of Roland Abante, his rise, his pain, and the emotional truth the show never revealed. For most people, the idea of standing on the world's biggest talent stage is a dream fueled by confidence, preparation, and years of opportunity. But for Roland Abante, that dream was tangled with fear, heartbreak, and silence from years of being told that people like him weren't meant to be seen, weren't meant to be heard. Before he ever stepped foot on the America's Got Talent stage, Roland lived a life defined by survival, not spotlight. The world knew him as the fisherman with the incredible voice, but they didn't know the emotional battles he had to fight long before anyone cared about his name. Roland grew up believing that dreams were luxuries, reserved for people who didn't have to worry about their next meal. As a child, he watched other kids talk about becoming singers, dancers, and stars, but he never allowed himself that kind of fantasy. Instead, he learned early on that life on the shoreline was unpredictable. One day could bring enough earnings to feed his family. The next could bring storms so violent they destroyed everything in their path. These harsh realities taught him something he never forgot. The world doesn't pause for your dreams, not even for a moment. But through all of this, Roland carried music inside him like a secret flame. He sang while mending nets, while staring out over dark waters, and while lying awake at night, wondering why life had denied him so many chances. His voice wasn't trained, polished, or shaped by professional teachers. It was shaped by grief, hope, and the unspoken tragedies he endured over the years. Whenever he felt overwhelmed by fear or sadness, he would sing, and in those moments he felt free. It was the only time he wasn't just another fisherman trying to survive. He was Roland, the man with a voice the ocean itself seemed to echo. But even with that gift, he never believed he deserved the stage. Too many times he had been told he wasn't good enough, skilled enough, or wealthy enough to pursue singing. People in his own town admired his voice, but saw him more as entertainment for small gatherings than someone who could stand beside global performers. That constant dismissal slowly carved doubt into his heart. He convinced himself that his voice was meant for the sea, not the world. Everything changed when someone posted a video of him singing online. It wasn't fancy or high quality, just Roland, sitting in a humble room, pouring his entire soul into a song. But that clip exploded. Suddenly, comments were pouring in from strangers across the globe. People were stunned by the power of his voice and the emotion behind every note. They encouraged him, pushed him, begged him to take a step he had never dared to take. Audition for America's Got Talent. But Roland was terrified. Not of singing, he had faced storms far more dangerous than a microphone. What he feared was disappointment. What if he wasn't good enough? What if the judges laughed? What if the world finally saw him and decided he wasn't worth remembering? All these questions haunted him for months. The idea of flying to America felt impossible for someone who had rarely traveled far from home. The cost, the risks, the fear of being rejected on a global stage, it was overwhelming. The turning point came late. One night when he sat alone after a long day at sea. The exhaustion hit him, but so did something else. The realization that he didn't want to leave this world without ever giving himself a real chance. He thought about the people he loved, the people he had lost, and the people who believed he was meant for something more. For the first time in his life, Roland allowed himself to imagine a future shaped not by fear but by courage. With trembling hands and a racing heart, Roland submitted his audition for a GT. He didn't expect anything. But deep down, a single spark of hope flickered, hope that maybe, just maybe, the world was finally ready to hear his story. When Roland Abante boarded a plane to America for the first time in his life, he wasn't just traveling across continents, he was crossing emotional boundaries he had avoided for years. Everything about the journey felt unreal. The airport, the cameras, the producers, the giant studio lights. Each new experience reminded him how far away he was from the life he had always known. But beneath his excitement lingered a quiet, aching fear, the fear of reliving a pain he had carried alone for decades. By the time Roland stepped backstage at America's Got Talent, he could feel the weight of his past pressing down on him. The nerves that viewers saw on screen weren't just from stage fright. They were the result of emotional wounds he had never healed. The producers asked him simple questions about his life, and every answer forced him to revisit memories he had spent years trying to forget. His struggle wasn't only financial or physical, it was deeply emotional. And the closer he got to that stage, the more those memories resurfaced. What the world didn't know was that Roland's life had been shaped by a series of heartbreaking losses. He had spent years working dangerous jobs to support loved ones, and along the way, he experienced grief that left permanent scars. People he cared about passed away too soon, leaving him with regrets and unanswered questions. Roland never spoke about these moments publicly. He didn't want pity. But those hidden tragedies shaped the raw, aching emotion that poured through his voice. Every time he sang, it was as if he was carrying the voices of the people he lost. When the stage manager finally called his name, Roland felt his legs tremble. The walk from backstage to the front of the GT audience felt like a journey through his entire past, every sacrifice, every heartbreak, every night he had sung alone in the dark. Even standing under the spotlights, he still wasn't sure if he belonged there. For a moment, he wanted to run. But then he remembered the people cheering for him back home, the messages from strangers who believed in him, and the promise he had made to himself. This time, don't be afraid. As he stood before the judges, Roland's voice shook as he introduced himself. But Simon's encouraging smile helped him steady his breath. Then the music began. The world saw a powerful performance filled with breathtaking emotion. But behind every note Roland delivered was the weight of a lifetime of pain. When he reached the soaring high notes of "When a Man Loves a Woman," viewers thought he was showing off his vocal ability. But in that moment, Roland wasn't just singing, he was grieving. He was remembering the people he had loved and lost, the sacrifices he made, and the version of himself who once believed he would never escape his circumstances. The audience felt the truth in his voice. Some cried. Others sat in complete silence, stunned by the sincerity and vulnerability he displayed. The judges were visibly emotional. When they rose to their feet in a standing ovation, Roland wasn't thinking about fame or victory. He was thinking about how far he had come. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to feel proud. But the most heartbreaking moment came after his performance, something the cameras didn't fully capture. When Roland walked backstage, he broke down in tears. Not because he was overwhelmed by the applause, but because the performance had reopened the emotional wounds he kept hidden for years. His handler tried to comfort him, but Roland explained that his heart felt heavy. Singing on that stage had forced him to face the pain he carried every day, the loneliness, the loss, and the pressure of being strong for everyone except himself. Yet, despite this emotional collapse, Roland also felt something else: relief. For the first time, he felt seen not as a fisherman, not as a background voice at a karaoke bar, but as a man whose story mattered. And as the judges' praises echoed in his memory, he realized something extraordinary. The world wasn't just moved by his talent. They were moved by his heart. For many America's Got Talent contestants, the show becomes the beginning of a bright new life. Doors open. Opportunities multiply. Dreams finally feel within reach. But for Roland Abante, the sudden rise to fame came with a heavy cost, one the world never saw, and one he never expected. While millions celebrated his performance, Roland was quietly battling a growing storm that threatened to undo everything he had worked so hard to achieve. After his audition went viral, Roland's life changed overnight. News stations in the Philippines covered his story. Global fans posted reaction videos praising his authenticity and heart. Messages poured in from every corner of the world, people thanking him for giving them hope, telling him how his voice had touched their souls. For someone who spent most of his life feeling invisible, this sudden outpouring of love was overwhelming. But along with the praise came pressures he had never prepared for. Producers, reporters, talent managers, and event organizers flooded him with calls. Everyone wanted a piece of Roland. Interviews, guest appearances, contracts, performances, social media obligations. Instead of giving him time to process his sudden fame, the world demanded more from him every day. And Roland, afraid of disappointing anyone, tried to say yes to everything. What people didn't understand was that Roland was still emotionally fragile from years of hardship. He wasn't used to the fast-paced world of entertainment, where pressure, expectations, and scrutiny never stop. At first, he tried to adapt, but with every passing day, the weight on his shoulders grew heavier. He barely slept. He constantly worried that fans would lose interest. And worst of all, he feared making even the smallest mistake. The fear of failure, a fear he had carried since childhood, began to take control again. Behind the scenes of his GT journey, Roland struggled with something even more heartbreaking: intense homesickness. Being away from his family, friends, and the familiar shores of the Philippines left him feeling lost. Fame had taken him far from home, but it had also isolated him. The people he trusted most were thousands of miles away, and the world around him felt unfamiliar and unpredictable. Just when Roland thought he was adjusting, a sudden emotional blow struck him, the kind that changes everything. Rumors began circulating online about his personal life. Some questioned his background. Others fabricated stories to draw attention. People who never knew him began twisting his past, exploiting his vulnerability for clicks and views. Roland tried to ignore it, but the hurt ran deep. After everything he had endured, he couldn't understand why strangers were attacking the innocence of his story. Then came the hardest moment of all. During one of his rehearsals for the next AGT round, Roland felt his voice crack, not from lack of practice, but from overwhelming stress. His chest tightened and his breathing became shallow. A wave of panic hit him as doubts rushed through his mind. What if I fail on live television? What if people stop believing in me? What if I disappoint everyone who supported me? He tried to push through, but the emotional pressure was too much. For the first time during his GT journey, he seriously considered withdrawing from the competition. The thought of facing the world again, knowing millions were watching every move, felt unbearable. The heartbreaking truth was that fame hadn't healed. Roland had exposed the emotional wounds he had spent years hiding. His past tragedies, the losses he carried, and the fear he lived with all resurfaced under the bright lights of America's biggest stage. Roland's loved ones back home noticed the change in his voice during their calls. He sounded tired, emotionally drained, even when he tried to hide it with forced smiles. His closest friends encouraged him to stay strong, reminding him how far he had come. But deep down, Roland knew he was reaching a breaking point, and yet, even in his darkest moments, there was something he held on to. The belief that his journey wasn't just about winning a competition. It was about honoring the people he loved, giving meaning to his struggles, and proving to himself that his life had value beyond survival. What no one knew at the time was that Roland's biggest heartbreak, the event that nearly destroyed everything, was still ahead of him. The final weeks of Roland Abante's America's Got Talent journey were filled with highs and lows that no viewer could have anticipated. On camera, he remained the same gentle, humble man who had captured hearts with his voice. Off camera, however, the pressures of fame, personal loss, and the unforgiving pace of the entertainment world took a toll few could see. While audiences cheered for his performances, Roland faced the harsh reality of balancing dreams with his emotional limits, a battle that nearly broke him entirely. As the competition progressed, Roland's life became a whirlwind of travel, rehearsals, interviews, and media attention. For someone accustomed to the calm rhythm of small-town life in the Philippines, this sudden acceleration was exhausting. Sleep became scarce, Moments of quiet reflection vanished. Every decision from song selection to wardrobe felt laden with expectation. The weight of public scrutiny was relentless, and Roland struggled to maintain the composure that viewers had come to admire. But even amid the chaos, the man behind the voice showed remarkable courage. Roland poured every ounce of his being into each performance, channeling the grief, hope, and resilience that had defined his life. Behind every note was a story of sacrifice. The family he had supported, the loved ones he had lost, the hardships that had forged him into a person capable of inspiring millions. To watch him sing was to witness the embodiment of survival, endurance, and the profound beauty of a life lived fully despite unimaginable challenges. Yet tragedy remained a shadow in his journey. Roland faced personal setbacks that shook him deeply. Family obligations required his attention from thousands of miles away. Financial pressures, compounded by the unpredictable demands of a budding career, made him question whether he could continue. Worst of all, the emotional strain of performing while carrying a lifetime of pain pushed him to his breaking point more than once. There were moments when he questioned whether stepping onto the AGT stage had been the right choice. Moments when the fame that should have felt like a dream instead felt like a burden too heavy to bear. Despite these struggles, Roland's story was not one of defeat, it was one of resilience. Each setback became a lesson in perseverance. He learned to navigate the complicated world of public attention while holding on to the authenticity that had made him beloved in the first place. Roland's experience demonstrated that even in tragedy there is the capacity for growth, courage, and dignity. He began to understand that success isn't measured only by trophies or accolades, but by the impact one leaves on the hearts of others by the time. Roland's journey on a GT concluded. He had transformed not only as a performer, but as a person. Though the world saw only a singer whose voice could move millions, Roland had gained the clarity that comes from facing personal trials head-on. He realized that the heartbreak, the sacrifices, and the moments of doubt had shaped him into someone stronger and more compassionate. His life, though marked by tragedy, had also become a testament to resilience, hope, and the human spirit's capacity to rise above adversity. Even after the cameras stopped rolling, Roland continued to inspire. He returned to his community with a renewed sense of purpose, using his platform to uplift others, advocate for the dreams of young people, and remind everyone that even the most ordinary life can produce extraordinary moments. His story is a poignant reminder that behind every viral performance is a human being with struggles, fears, and hopes as real and deep as any audience could imagine. Ultimately, the heartbreaking tragedy of Roland Abante isn't just a tale of challenges faced on a talent show stage. It's the story of a man who dared to dream despite every obstacle. It is the story of pain transformed into passion, fear converted into courage, and life's hardships turned into a voice that resonates far beyond a television screen. Roland's journey proves that even when tragedy shapes a life, hope, perseverance, and authenticity can create a legacy that touches hearts around the world.